The last time I spoke to you all, we took a look at the things the BIONICLE Generation 2 got right, the theme's greatest successes. But today we'll be taking a look at the other side of that coin, as we analyze some of BIONICLE G2's less than stellar aspects. Where did it all go wrong? Let's try and figure that out. Hello everybody and welcome to the top 10 worst things about BIONICLE G2. Before I get into this list, I just want to reiterate that this is fairly subjective. BIONICLE is a wide-ranging theme, and many different people have different aspects of a theme that they prize above others. Taking that into account, what I think went wrong with G2 might not be the same as what you think. Based on a lot of community observation, though, I'm fairly confident that this list encompasses the majority of the severe issues. Kicking off the list at number 10, we've got the lack of really good video games. BIONICLE G1 had a plethora of different approaches to games. Both free games released on Bionicle.com and retail games released on consoles and handhelds were produced over the course of the theme's initial run, and they helped popularize and develop the theme quite a lot. While the retail games are beloved by many and regarded as very nostalgic, it's the online games that made the biggest impact on the theme's legacy. The two notable standouts that people always go to are the Makuta online game and, to a slightly lesser extent in many people's eyes, its sequel, Makuta 2. These games fleshed out the world of BIONICLE and provided an alternative to the main story, delivering world building in spades and some truly memorable and nostalgic moments. BIONICLE G2 took a slightly different approach to games. Rather than use them as an alternative means of storytelling, they tried to cater towards kids of the modern era by releasing mobile games that prioritized instant gratification and addicting gameplay over meaningful additions to the story or the theme. Both Mask of Creation and Mask of Control were cool for mobile games, but did very little to provide any notable substance to G2's legacy. Next up at number 9, we have the poorly written characters. BIONICLE G1 had a plethora of diverse and interesting characters with unique backstories, motivations, and character arcs. Not everybody was extremely developed. Cliches and personality tropes were quite common, but there were a large amount of dynamic characters in BIONICLE G1 who grew and changed as the theme progressed, and they were put into situations that challenged them. The characters in G2 show none of that sort of development whatsoever. The Toa are flat, fairly uninteresting characters who go through very little serious growth in the series. The only lesson they truly learn is unity, and even then they repeatedly fail to demonstrate it until they get reminded multiple times. Ikimu is a character who never truly developed any significant personality until Journey to 1, where he became this haughty mentor character who had basically read the script. The prophecy of light. The villains had very simplistic goals and motivations. Take over the island, take over the world, take my rightful place among the gods. Makuta Fiasco in G1 wasn't the most phenomenal villain ever shown in storytelling, but he did have substantially more depth than any villain in G2. Finally, the Toa were written inconsistently between years. Personality traits were alluded to but never shown in story, characterization was shown and then promptly taken away, and certain characters changed how they acted depending on the circumstance. Pohatu is the biggest example of this. He's almost unrecognizable between the 2015 animations and Journey to 1. Basically, in short, the characters in G2 were not stellar whatsoever. Taking the 8th spot on this countdown is the 2015 online animations. The 2015 animations were the first piece of media we received for G2, and they were used to intro the theme at the NYCC launch party. Short 90-second online animations were released throughout the course of 2015 on LEGO's official YouTube channel and Bionicle.com. They are infamous for only featuring one voice actor, who read the character's lines in an audiobook-esque format. He did a great job for what he was given, and Journey to 1 later represented the animations very clearly as a story being told to Okotan children, so they become somewhat better in hindsight. But at the time, many were somewhat disappointed. Line delivery felt stilted, the pacing was very rushed, and characterization was a little difficult to pinpoint considering the format. Additionally, their length and release patterns certainly gave credence to the fact that LEGO wasn't all that confident in BIONICLE G2. Otherwise, it would have launched with a TV series of some kind, like most of their original IPs do receive in the modern era. It would have served their purpose perfectly fine if they were used as an abridged version of the story as an entry point for newer fans to learn about the basics before delving in. But for the majority of 2015, they were the only story content the theme received, so interest in BIONICLE's plot died off fairly quickly. The lackluster summer waves of G2 sets take the 7th place on this countdown. It was a trend throughout Bionicle's 2-year run that the summer waves tended to be far weaker than their winter counterparts. 2015 featured the Masters, nostalgic reimaginings of everyone's favorite heroes, and a stellar wave of small sets in the Protectors. The latter half of 2015 featured the Skull Villains, which were comparatively simplistic, strange-looking, and very, very polarizing. 2016, on the other hand, featured the Uniters, and while these sets were not unanimously loved by everybody, they were still quite innovative, and once they were received by most community members, people came around to them. Additionally, we received some incredibly unique builds with the Creatures, and Umarak the Hunter, who stands strong as one of Bionicle's most impressive titans, from an aesthetic standpoint at least. G2's final wave, however, gave us the Beasts, strange-looking creatures that featured some downright bizarre design choices that I still don't fully understand to this day, like the immovable open mouths or the perplexing lower legs. Despite standout sets in Akimu and, to a lesser extent, Umarak the Destroyer, both summer waves never truly left a completely positive impression in anyone's mind. Coming in at number 6, we have G2's dropped plot points. This is a big one. Throughout the entirety of Bionicle G2, it always felt to the community as if there was a disconnect between the writers of the story and the writers of the story Bible. Per our interview with writer Wyndham, we learned that the story Bible was never truly complete. Things kept being added and changed, seemingly at random intervals. This led to a massive disconnect in how the information of the story was related to the fanbase, considering that the writers never actually knew what they were able to write about and how to properly tell the story. Additionally, the theme's premature end certainly didn't help matters, and a lot of things seemingly ended up being unfired Chekhov's guns. For instance, the Vahi, the mysterious mask which Akimu used to foretell the future, at least according to Graphic Novel 2, was built up as being quite important. The Vahi was very integral to the early story of G2's world, although shrouded in mystery. It even sparked community debates about whether G1 was connected to G2 in some way. Regardless, that plot thread never went anywhere whatsoever. In addition, the Toa's mysterious past, where exactly they came from, their mysterious feeling of familiarity with the labyrinth of control, these things had no relevance whatsoever in the grand scheme of the story. Considering we had information being dropped on the website or in LEGO clubs that were never referenced in the main story, and information that was referenced in the main story never had any relevance to anything in the grand scheme of things and ended up being dropped completely, G2's story ended up feeling quite fragmented, hence its spot on this countdown. The 5th spot goes to one particular important discrepancy/plot hole within G2's story. Graphic Novel 2 states that Akimu and the Ancient Protectors used the Vahi to see into the future, which gave them knowledge about the arrival of the Toa, the island's peril, and the menace that was soon to greet them. It was shown in this graphic novel that Akimu had never even heard the word Toa before donning the Mask of Time. However, Journey to 1's finale introduces a new backstory, the Prophecy of Light, which depicts everything that happened in G2's story in vivid, unmistakable detail, and is written inside both the capital city and the Temple of Light. Because of this, Akimu knew not just that the Toa would arrive in Okoto for an incredibly long time, but everything else that happened in G2 as well, right down to Umarak getting large golden horns in his mutated form, and Gali being the one to get sucked into the Shadow Realm. It's incredibly specific, insanely contrived, and to be honest, it just came out of nowhere. It clashes with the story points that were established prior, and it feeds into the whole thing with the story being fragmented quite a lot. Number 4 must go to the ending of the Journey to 1. Prophecy of Light aside, the ending to JTO was filled with strange circumstances and perplexing moments. This is likely due to the fact that the theme was cancelled during the production of Journey to 1, and as such, the show likely suffered severe rewrites to condense what would have been the third act of the story into the series' final episode. The end result is not pretty. Mikimu's completely unexplained and hilariously ineffective transformation, Bohatu's random out-of-nowhere power-up, the aforementioned Prophecy of Light, a Gil's sudden perplexing appearance and relevance or lack thereof, some truly awkward dialogue, and the incredibly anticlimactic and nonsensical way that Makuta is defeated make Journey to 1's ending a profoundly unsatisfactory conclusion to Bionicle G2. I must say though, considering their limitations, I feel Volta handled it about as well as anyone could have, if only the theme hadn't been prematurely cancelled. As we move into the top 3, we must talk about another ripple effect of Bionicle's early cancellation. is a little something I like to call the Makuta Fiasco. This will surely be at the top of many people's lists as far as frustrating circumstances go. Leading up to the official announcement of Bionicle's cancellation, there was all sorts of speculation about whether Bionicle would receive its promised third year. People's hopes for a consolation of sorts to ease this probable disappointment ranged from a final wave to send off the theme a la Bionicle Stars, or a post-summer set, similarly to how people had hoped for a Mononobe robot model to conclude Bionicle G1. Eventually, the Makuta model in Journey to One was revealed, and people jumped for joy, assuming that at least the Makuta model would be released as a post-summer set. However, this did not end up proving to be the case. The Makuta model used in Journey to One ended up being a combiner of 7 sets from G2's run that would never see any kind of official retail release, and LEGO refused to release proper instructions for this model, leading fans to have to use deconstructed pictures of it as a framework to replicate it for themselves. In addition, the final mask for Bionicle G2, the Mask of Ultimate Power, which received an incredible amount of build-up in the story, was not released in any way whatsoever, prompting fans to make the mask available to order through Shapeways so that the common person could obtain it for themselves. The Makuta ordeal is a prime example of how to disappoint and mislead a fan base at every turn. But of course, such things are expected when a theme gets cancelled before its ended time. The stars were the exception, not the rule as far as finale waves are concerned, and even that didn't please everyone. Regardless, this event was profoundly disappointing, and it deserves its spot on this countdown. The second worst thing about Bionicle G2 was its lack of advertising. A common and noteworthy complaint about the handling of Bionicle Gen 2 is that it was barely marketed. Despite an initial advertising push in NYCC, the theme slowly drifted off of LEGO's priority list. The animations were given the barest minimum of advertising, TV commercials were few and far between, as well as being fairly unmemorable. The Journey to One being a Netflix series limited its reach and ended up probably gaining far fewer fans than it would have had it been released on actual television. The set stopped being promoted heavily in both LEGO Club magazines and LEGO catalogs. The contests run for Bionicle seemed to only cater towards the pre-established fan base rather than any attempt to draw in new fans, and perhaps most frustratingly of all, neither the books nor the graphic novels were ever given significant promotion on any official Bionicle channels. This is a problem I have with G1 as well, but at least that theme had more sources of story to work with, like comics or games, so the lack of advertising for the books wasn't a huge deal considering they didn't go away until 2009. But they were never mentioned in an official capacity on official channels except for 2 small pictures of the cover art for Island of Lost Masks and Revenge of the Skull Spiders on a LEGO subsidiary lifestyle page. This lack of effort towards getting the word out about Bionicle's revival likely stems from the fact that it was a construction theme and likely did not have a huge budget. Regardless, it's still an incredibly sad turn of events. That all being said, the worst thing that took place in the entirety of Bionicle G2's run is the oversimplification of the theme and its storytelling. This thought is a pretty common one, and I feel like many will agree here. Was Bionicle G1 a little too complex at times? Yeah, they probably could have done with cutting back on the ridiculous terminology and branching plot at times, because it likely did make things hard to follow for newcomers. That being said, G2 went way too far in the opposite direction. It's very sad when there were large, branching discussions had in 2015 about whether characters should have names or not. Thankfully, this was corrected in the 2016 waves of Bionicle, beasts aside, but that was our first clue as to how G2 would be handled. Terminology was removed and/or simplified, characters were named as generically as possible, the plot was watered down and simplistic with very little interesting and surprising stuff happening within it, the world building was largely absent until later on in the theme's lifespan, and the entire experience just felt mostly like a hollow shell, a fleeting sense of what Bionicle could be, buried underneath all the attempts to modernize the content for the kids of today. It's a valid concern. The Bionicle team, and whoever was behind the decision to do all this stuff, was clearly very concerned that Bionicle wouldn't catch on with modern-day children if it was too convoluted and complex. And honestly, some of the stuff that happened in G1 supports that belief. But few people can argue that G2 took it way too far, and in the end, the theme and its legacy suffered for it. But those are just our thoughts. What are yours? Share your own least favorite things about Bionicle G2 in the comment section below or on the TTV Message Boards at board.ttvchannel.com. Special thanks to our moderator, Waj from the TTV Message Boards, for editing this top 10 for us. Finally, consider pledging to our Patreon at patreon.com/the TTV channel for some cool perks and early access to all of our content. I'm Meso, and thank you all very much for watching.